Nobody remembered how it started anymore. Maybe it was a mining dispute, a careless insult during a peace summit, or just one unlucky shot fired from the wrong ship at the wrong time. The galaxy had been a simmering pot of tensions for years. Humanity had been the newcomers, fresh, curious, a little arrogant, but mostly harmless. At least, that's what the other species thought. They didn't know us. Not really. At first, it was supposed to be a small conflict, a quick war, maybe a few burned colonies, a treaty signed under duress, the usual politics of power. The bigger empires, the Kravlon Syndicate, the Trelzon Unity, the Vor Consortium, they laughed when humanity sent its first fleets into battle. Primitive, they said, emotional, reckless, easy prey. The first battles were brutal, but predictable. Human ships were torn apart by advanced alien weaponry. Thousands died screaming in the cold of space. Entire settlements were wiped out. Their cities melted into glass by plasma bombs. Their leaders paraded on enemy broadcasts as warnings. But humans, they didn't break. They adapted. Fast. Within months, new ships rolled off the dry docks. They were tougher, uglier, built with the single-minded purpose of surviving hell. New weapons, reverse-engineered from captured tech, tore into enemy fleets like rabid wolves. And something darker happened too. Something the galaxy wasn't ready for. The rules of war, the old codes of honor that every other species obeyed, humanity shattered them like brittle glass. No mercy, no surrender. Every battle ended with the same brutal message. If you cross us, we will erase you. Human soldiers became nightmares whispered in alien tongues. They called them Deathborn, Flesh Reapers, World Breakers. Small squads of humans dropped onto enemy worlds, leaving behind nothing but ash and broken monuments. They learned alien psychology, used it against them, turned fear into a weapon deadlier than any plasma rifle. There was no peace offering, no ceasefire negotiations. Humanity didn't want forgiveness. They wanted fear, and they got it. Children across the galaxy cried at night, not from tales of monsters hiding under the bed, but of humans slipping through the cracks in the walls. But it wasn't enough. No, not yet. Humanity had lost too much to stop now. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something worse. Revenge. In the burned-out ruins of New Saigon, under a sky still bleeding from orbital bombardments, General Elena Merrick stood before the shattered remains of her homeworld. Her skin was cut from shrapnel. Her armor was dented and bloody. Her voice, when she spoke to the scattered remnants of Earth's military, was low and full of something far colder than rage. They thought we were soft, she said. They thought we would kneel. They were wrong. The crowd, a battered legion of survivors, listened in silence. The wind carried the stench of death across the cratered ground. "We will not rebuild," Elena said, eyes burning like twin stars. "We will not forgive. From this day forward, we are not the dreamers. We are not the lost children of a dying world. We are the nightmare. We are the extinction they begged for." And the galaxy would never forget what came next. The campaign that followed was called many things by historians: the Great Purge, the Age of Fire, humanity's reckoning. But to those who lived it, it was simply terror in its purest form. Fleet by fleet, world by world, humanity moved through the stars like a storm that would never end. Their ships were no longer sleek or beautiful. They were brutal machines, built with sharp, jagged lines to inspire dread. Some even broadcasted the screams of fallen enemies across enemy frequencies before each battle, a psychological warfare tactic that made even the bravest alien admirals hesitate before giving orders to engage. The Vor Consortium was the first major empire to fall. They had once called humanity a minor pest. That memory didn't save them. On the red sands of Vor Prime, survivors crawled from the ruins of their shining cities only to be rounded up by human shock troops. No treaties were signed. No mercy was shown. The humans dismantled the Vor civilization piece by piece, stripping their libraries, burning their temples, and smashing their monuments into dust. They weren't just killing bodies anymore. They were erasing histories, cultures, memories. Across the galaxy, desperate cries for help echoed from every system under siege. The Kravlon Syndicate pleaded for an emergency alliance. The Trelzan Unity sent emissaries offering reparations and apologies. Old enemies who had fought for centuries now begged each other to stand together against the humans. But it was too late. Humanity didn't want peace. They didn't even want control. They wanted the galaxy to fear the night, to jump at shadows, to wake up sweating from nightmares where Earth's flag burned above their ruins. General Merrick watched all of it unfold from the bridge of the Dreadnought Remembrance, her personal command ship. She wore no insignia anymore. Humanity had no need for symbols of rank. All that mattered was survival, vengeance, and dominance. A junior officer approached her, his face pale even under the harsh light of the war room. "General," he said, voice trembling slightly, "we've received word from the Council of Eldari. They offer unconditional surrender and reparations. They're willing to give us 12 core worlds and access to their entire tech vault." Elena stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Her eyes were like the cold vacuum between stars. Empty, merciless. "Burn them anyway," she said. The officer hesitated. "But ma'am, they surrendered." "They should have thought of that before they butchered our children," Elena said, her voice flat. "No deals. No forgiveness." The command was given. Within hours, the Eldari core worlds were turned into blackened husks, their once beautiful biospheres choked with ash and radiation. News of the massacre traveled faster than light, and with it, the legend of humanity's wrath grew. Entire star systems went dark, their populations hiding underground, trying to become invisible. Pirates, mercenaries, smugglers, all vanished like mist before the advancing human fleets. Even the most savage species in the galaxy, the warlike Vardoth, who prided themselves on their bloodthirstiness, refused to engage human ships. It didn't matter. Humanity hunted them down anyway. It wasn't war anymore, it was extermination. And the galaxy finally understood. This wasn't about victory. It wasn't even about survival. It was about fear, pure, crushing fear. And humanity was winning. The third year of the war turned the galaxy into a graveyard. Where once stars had twinkled against the velvet darkness, now there were only fields of wreckage. Silent hulks of destroyed ships, charred remains of orbital cities, shattered satellites tumbling endlessly through the void. Humanity had become something more than just a military force. They were myth now. Every child born on an alien world grew up fearing the faceless, relentless monsters that came from the cradle of Earth. But it wasn't just soldiers anymore. It was every human. Farmers, doctors, teachers, scientists. Everyone had become part of the machine of war. Everyone had blood on their hands. No one was innocent. On the war front, Captain Marcus Vance led the 17th Infiltration Corps, one of the most feared units in existence. His orders were simple. Make examples. Not just tactical victories, but psychological devastation. On a small jungle moon called Veyron 6, a Trelzan refugee colony had hidden away, deep within the thick, misty forests. They thought the trees and fog would protect them. They thought humanity would ignore them, an unarmed, starving cluster of civilians. They were wrong. Vance's team dropped from orbit in silence, their black-armored forms blending into the shadows. The refugees didn't even know they were under attack, until the first firestorm swallowed their shelters. Vance watched through his visor as mothers clutched their children and fled into the trees, only to be corralled by walls of flame and gunfire. His men didn't fire indiscriminately. No, they herded the survivors, forced them into clearings, made sure there were witnesses to the horror. Trelzan culture valued honor above all else. They believed dying in battle was the only noble death. Vance knew this, and so his orders were clear. Don't give them battle. Give them slaughter. Give them shame. When the smoke cleared, the survivors stumbled away from the ruins, broken in both body and spirit. Messages were carved into the smoldering trees in every human language, translated through alien symbols. We are your fate. Word spread quickly. The Trelzan unity crumbled from within a month later, as suicides, mutinies, and desertions tore through their ranks faster than any human fleet could have. Back aboard the Remembrance, General Merrick stood in the war room, watching the holographic star maps flicker. Red marked every fallen world. Yellow marked the systems still resisting. Green. There was no green left. There hadn't been for months. An advisor approached her, hesitant. A rare thing these days. Few dared interrupt Marek when she was planning a campaign. General, the advisor said, intelligence reports that several non-aligned systems are considering preemptive surrender. They're requesting guarantees of survival if they turn over their resources and leaders. Marek turned, a slow, deliberate motion that made the younger officer step back instinctively. Guarantees? She echoed, voice dripping with scorn. Where were their guarantees when Earth's colonies burned, when our children screamed into the void? She leaned closer, voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Tell them no deals, no treaties. They can run, they can hide, it doesn't matter. Humanity remembers. The advisor nodded quickly and fled, leaving Marek alone with her maps and her ghosts. Outside, in the cold blackness of space, humanity's fleets grew ever larger, fueled by salvaged alien technology and the iron will of a species betrayed. They didn't build monuments to their fallen. They didn't sing songs of heroism or victory. They built war machines. They forged nightmares. In the Outer Rim systems, an old alien sage, blind and half-mad from decades of war, spoke to a gathering of refugees. His voice was cracked and brittle, but heavy with prophecy. You do not understand the humans, he rasped. You think they fight for pride or conquest or even revenge. No, you fools. They fight because it is all they have left. Pain has consumed them, shaped them. They have become the storm itself. You cannot reason with a storm. You can only pray it does not see you. But the storm was already on its way. Engines screamed across the void. Hulls bristled with weapons crafted in the fires of endless war. The humans were coming, and they would not stop. In the quiet stretches of Sector 9, where the stars hung like cold lanterns in an endless night, the last great alliance of alien species prepared for their final stand. They had no illusions anymore. This wasn't a battle they could win. It was a delaying tactic, a desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, a miracle would save them. The Council of 9 Worlds, once proud rulers of half the known galaxy, met aboard the Sanctum Eternum, a ship the size of a small moon. It bristled with shields and cannons, wrapped in layers of armor thicker than cities, powered by the last relics of ancient technology no one fully understood. In a vast, shadowed chamber, the council argued in a dozen languages. They are but one species, shouted Vokhtar of the Rilnax Dominion, his spines trembling with fury. We outnumber them. We outgun them. And yet your worlds are ash, Rilnax, hissed Madame Seleth of the Kryn Confederacy. Their rage is a fire we cannot extinguish. We feed it with every battle. They have no honor, croaked High Minister Juleven, her eyes hollow. They fight like beasts, worse than beasts. They destroy not to conquer but to erase. We are facing something unnatural." At the head of the table, Supreme Chancellor Virel of the Eldari Alliance lifted his hand for silence. His golden robes, once a symbol of wisdom and peace, hung heavy on his frail frame. "We have but one option left," Virel said, voice tired but steady. "We fight to the last. We show them that we will not die quietly." Across the chamber, there was a grim nodding of heads. No words of hope were offered. No speeches of triumph. Just acceptance. They sent their fleets to the edge of the Helios Rift, a strategic choke point where they could force humanity to come to them. It was the largest gathering of ships in galactic history. Millions of vessels, countless soldiers, the combined might of a dozen civilizations. And it wasn't enough. From the blackness beyond the rift, the human armada emerged like a swarm of mechanical locusts. Their ships, black as oil and bristling with weapons, advanced without formation, without ceremony. No battle cries, no demands, no warnings, only the slow, inevitable march of death. On the bridge of the Remembrance, General Merrick stood motionless, hands clasped behind her back. Beside her, Captain Vance watched the enemy fleets align in tight, disciplined formations. "They're ready for us," he said quietly. "They think that matters," Merrick replied, her voice colder than the vacuum outside. She gestured toward the comms officer. "Broadcast." The officer nodded and opened a channel. Across every ship, every station, every world tuned to the frequencies of the Helios Rift, a single message echoed. Not words, not a speech, just one image. Earth burning. The humans didn't need to explain. The galaxy already knew why they fought. With a silent command, the human fleets opened fire. No tactics, no mercy, just overwhelming, relentless destruction. The Helios Rift lit up like a dying sun. Energy beams tore through capital ships like paper. Missile swarms blackened the skies. Human boarding pods slammed into enemy vessels, disgorging death squads that swept through the halls like phantoms. The Council's mighty defenses crumbled in hours. Supreme Chancellor Virel watched in stunned silence as the battle collapsed around him. Screens showed ship after ship erupting in flame, stations torn apart by railgun fire, escape pods vaporized before they could reach safety. He turned to his aides, voice breaking. Was there ever any hope? No one answered. Across the void, Captain Vance led the final charge aboard the Dreadnought Savage Dawn. His soldiers moved without hesitation, without pity. He stepped over the bodies of council guards and aides, his rifle spitting death in all directions. In the council chamber, Vance found Chancellor Virel kneeling among the ruins, still clutching the broken seal of his once great alliance. Vance raised his weapon. Virel didn't beg. He just whispered, "Why?" Vance hesitated for a single breath. Then he answered, voice like iron, "Because you made us monsters." The shot echoed through the shattered chamber. When it was over, the last hope of the galaxy lay dead in the ruins of the Sanctum Aeternum. And humanity moved on, leaving only silence in their wake. In the aftermath of the Helios Rift massacre, there was no more resistance. No fleets, no alliances, no treaties whispered in the darkness. What few scattered colonies and strongholds remained hid themselves beneath oceans, inside mountains, or deep underground, hoping to be overlooked, forgotten. But humanity didn't forget. They hunted. Entire star systems were quarantined and burned. Planets that showed signs of alien habitation were scoured from orbit. There were no speeches, no demands for tribute, no banners of conquest raised. Humanity wasn't interested in ruling anyone. They didn't want to govern an empire. They wanted silence. Absolute, permanent silence. Captain Marcus Vance, now promoted to general after the fall of the Council, led Operation Clane Sweep, a campaign to erase the last pockets of organized alien life. On board the assault carrier, Black Mercy, he watched from the observation deck as firestorms consumed the lush jungles of Edras IV. Once a vibrant world, filled with towering blue forests and shimmering lakes, Edras IV had been home to millions of peaceful Arvani. They had tried to surrender, even offered humans entire continents in exchange for mercy. It didn't matter. Vance didn't feel anger anymore as he watched their world die. He didn't feel anything at all. The fires reflected in his deadened eyes, and all he could think was, they would have done the same to us if they could. The humans had convinced themselves of that long ago. It made the extermination easier. It made the nightmares quieter at night. On the bridge of the Remembrance, General Elena Marique stood before a wall of tactical reports, her mind working faster than any computer. She had built this campaign from the ashes of Earth, forged it into the purest expression of humanity's fury. And now, standing on the edge of total galactic silence, she should have felt triumph. Instead, she felt hollow. An aide approached cautiously, holding a data slate. "General," he said softly, "the Zolari Enclave has sent a plea for negotiations. They're offering full surrender. And reparations." Merrick didn't look at him. She didn't even blink. "Send a response," she said. "Yes, ma'am. What should we—" 2 words. The aide swallowed. "Which words?" Merrick turned her gaze on him, her eyes colder than the vacuum of space. "No survivors." The aide fled to carry out the order. In the depths of human space, Earth itself had changed beyond recognition. It was no longer the blue marble that poets once sang about. Massive shipyards floated in orbit like mechanical tumors. The surface had been stripped for resources, rebuilt into vast cities of black steel and concrete, bristling with gun emplacements and shield generators. There were no more parks, no more theaters, no more dreams of peace, only preparation for the next war, the next threat, real or imagined. Back on the Black Mercy, Vance walked through the corridors lined with soldiers. Each one wore the same dead stare, the same empty pride. They passed murals not of heroes or victories, but of the fallen. Images of Earth's burning colonies, of craters where cities once stood, of monuments to betrayal. The humans didn't glorify what they had become. They didn't lie to themselves. They knew. And they accepted it. In one quiet corner of the ship, a group of new recruits sat, watching an old video loop from before the war. It showed Earth as it once was. Blue skies, green forests, laughter, music, things they would never see except on screens. A boy, no older than 18, asked his sergeant, "Was it really like that?" The sergeant, a veteran with scars down half his face, stared at the screen for a long time. When he finally answered, his voice was rough and low. "It was," he said, "before they took it from us." The boy looked back at the screen, and for a moment there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Grief, maybe. Longing, hope. But it faded quickly, smothered by the same grim determination that filled all of humanity now. Hope was dangerous. Hope could get you killed. Better to be the nightmare. Better to be the storm. Across the galaxy, systems continued to go dark, one after another, like candles snuffed out by a merciless wind. There were no more cries for help. No more desperate messages across the stars. Only silence. And humanity ruled that silence with an iron grip. The galaxy had never been quieter. Where once there had been bustling trade routes, flashing beacons of communication, and vibrant cities on 1,000 worlds, now there was only empty space and abandoned ruins. Humanity had won. They had crushed every enemy, silenced every voice, buried every history but their own. But victory tasted like ash. On board the Remembrance, General Merrick sat alone in her private chamber, staring at a hologram flickering weakly above her desk. It was an old image, an Earth sunrise, golden light spilling over a field of wildflowers. A place that didn't exist anymore. Sometimes she wondered if it had ever been real at all, or if it was just a fantasy they'd invented to justify everything they had done. A knock came at her door. She didn't answer, but it opened anyway. Captain Vance entered, his armor scuffed from the latest campaign, his expression grim as always. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. Merrick didn't look up. "Another pocket of survivors?" "No," Vance said. "Something else." He activated a small device, and the hologram shifted. It showed a planet on the far edge of the Perseus Arm, unnamed, officially abandoned. No settlements, no known alien presence. And yet, sensor logs showed movement, structures, life signs, human life signs. Merrick's brows knitted together. "Explain." Vance hesitated. "They're defectors," he said finally. "Refugees from Earth. Dissidents. They abandoned the war effort years ago, went dark. Built their own colony out here, off the grid." Merrick's mouth tightened into a hard line. Dissidents. Traitors. People who had run from humanity's final stand because they couldn't stomach the blood it demanded. "How many?" she asked. "Couple thousand, maybe more," Vance said. "They've established farms, schools, a real community. No military presence. They don't even have orbital defenses." Merrick stared at the projection, feeling a strange tightness in her chest. They were human. They were the future humanity had lost. "They're breeding weakness," Vance said, as if reading her mind. "If we let them survive, others might follow, might start thinking there's another way besides strength." Merrick closed her eyes for a long moment. She could almost hear the voices of her fallen comrades, the ones who had died screaming in the early days of the war, the children whose lives had been snuffed out in alien bombardments, the families torn apart by greed and betrayal. We didn't sacrifice everything just to let it all rot. Her hands clenched into fists. "Prepare the fleet," she said finally, voice like iron. "We wipe them out." Vance saluted sharply, but there was something else in his eyes this time. A flicker of doubt? Regret? It didn't matter. Doubt had no place here. As Vance left, Merrick turned back to the hologram of Earth's sunrise. She stared at it for a long time, feeling something deep inside her twist and break. They would never see it again, she realized. The humanity that had loved, dreamed, built beautiful things, that humanity was dead. All that remained was the monster. 2 days later, the Remembrance arrived in orbit over the rogue colony. The settlers had no ships, no weapons capable of piercing the human fleet's shields. Their only defense was a pathetic old communication array, broadcasting a simple message on all frequencies. "We are your brothers and sisters. We only seek peace." Merrick listened to it once, then ordered the bombardment. The sky turned red over the rogue colony as kinetic strikes rained down like the wrath of forgotten gods. Forests ignited into walls of flame. Rivers boiled dry. Buildings shattered like glass under the relentless assault. In a control center deep within the colony, a small group of civilians huddled together, clutching each other as the world collapsed around them. There were no soldiers among them, no weapons raised in defiance, only terrified mothers shielding their children, elders praying in a dozen dead languages, young faces pressed against cold stone floors, waiting for the end. And the humans above, once protectors, now executioners, delivered it without hesitation. When the smoke cleared and the last screams faded, there was nothing left but blackened earth and molten ruins. No songs, no memorials, no witnesses. Humanity had turned its own future into a graveyard, and deep inside the remembrance, in the silence of her private chamber, General Elena Merrick sat before the flickering image of a long-dead Earth, and for the first time in years, she wept. Not for the enemy, not for the dead, but for the monstrous thing she and all of humanity had become, and the terrible truth that there was no way back. The galaxy, once vibrant with countless cultures and histories, now drifted as little more than a collection of tombstones under cold stars. Humanity had wiped the board clean. No more alien empires, no more challengers, no more enemies. But victory had left them hollow. Without wars to fight, the fleets began turning inward. Old divisions, long buried under the shared rage of survival, began to crack open again. Different admirals, different factions, each with their own vision for what humanity should become, now that the galaxy lay in ruins at their feet. On board the Remembrance, General Elena Merrick convened her final council, a gathering of the surviving military leaders who had guided humanity through its darkest hours. They met in the Grand Atrium, a room once filled with the banners of Earth's nations. Now only black flags hung, stained with soot and ash. Around the massive steel table, grim-faced men and women argued. "We can rebuild," said Admiral Holt, pounding a gauntleted fist against the table. "We have the knowledge, the tech. We can bring back civilization." "Rebuild what?" snapped Commodore Tessa Vryn. "There's no one left to trade with. No culture left to integrate. We are alone. We will rot here unless we keep moving. Keep fighting." "Fighting who?" Holt shot back. "We killed them all." Across the room, another general muttered, "Then maybe we turn the guns on each other." The words hung heavy in the air. General Merrick sat silently at the head of the table, listening, watching, measuring the weight of their words. They were soldiers, bred and broken by endless war. None of them remembered how to live without it. Neither did she. Vance stood quietly beside her, arms crossed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes told her everything she already knew. Humanity wasn't made for peace anymore. It was made for conquest, for brutality, for domination. Without an enemy, it would tear itself apart. Merrick rose from her seat slowly, and the room fell silent. "Enough," she said, her voice low and final. "There will be no rebuilding." Murmurs swept through the room. "General," she cut them off with a glance. "There's nothing left to rebuild," she continued. "We have outlived our purpose. The galaxy doesn't need rulers. It needs ghosts, memories, warnings carved into the bones of history." Holt looked at her like she had gone mad. "You want us to just disappear?" "I want humanity to remain what we have become," Merrick said. "A nightmare, a legend, a force whispered about by those who dare rise from the ashes." Vance finally spoke. "We keep the fleets moving. No homeworld, no empire, only stories, only fear." It was a mad plan, a suicidal plan, but somehow in their broken hearts, the Council knew it was the only one that made sense. They were not builders anymore. They were destroyers, and destroyers had no place in a peaceful galaxy. Slowly, grudgingly, they agreed. The new directive was simple. The fleets would divide into nomadic forces. They would travel the dead lanes of space, visible only when they chose to be. If new civilizations rose from the ruins, if any dared to forget the horrors of war, humanity would return. Not to rule, but to remind. The Remembrance would become the first ghost fleet, slipping into deep space without a trace. As the Council dispersed, preparing to carve humanity into drifting legends, Merrick stood alone at the viewport of the ship. Beyond the thick glass, stars stretched out into forever. For a moment, she allowed herself to dream to imagine what might have been if only the galaxy had welcomed them instead of trying to crush them. If only humanity hadn't been forced to become the very thing it had once feared. A faint buzz broke the silence, a new message on her console. She opened it without thinking. It was from one of the surviving scientists back on Earth, what was left of Earth, anyway. An anomaly detected, far beyond known space. Signals too structured to be natural. Something alive. Merrick stared at the report, her heart cold and steady. Perhaps humanity's nightmare wasn't done after all. Perhaps the galaxy still had one last enemy left to find. She turned from the viewport, her cape brushing the cold steel floor, and issued a single command. Plot a course. In the silent, endless dark, humanity's ghosts stirred once more, hungering for one final war. The engines of the Remembrance roared to life, shaking the very bones of the ancient ship as it prepared to plunge into the unknown. Around it, the newly formed ghost fleets readied themselves, massive hulks painted black to blend into the dark between stars. There were no banners, no broadcasts of power or dominance. Humanity was moving like a whisper this time, a cold, relentless breath against the neck of whatever awaited them beyond the rim. In the command deck, General Elena Marique stood with Captain Vance, staring at the star map as it plotted a path into uncharted space. A thick patch of darkness, where even the most advanced sensors had failed to penetrate, stretched ahead of them like a waiting maw. The anomaly had not sent a greeting. It had not sent a threat. It had simply signaled. And that was enough. Merrick clenched her hands behind her back, feeling the familiar stirrings of purpose, the only purpose they had left. Vance leaned toward her, voice low. What if it's nothing? Just cosmic noise? Merrick's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. Then we leave our mark anyway. He didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue about. As the fleets moved out, leaving behind the scorched remains of known space, a quiet tension settled over the human forces. These were not the vibrant, reckless soldiers who had first sailed into galactic war years ago. These were hardened relics, living weapons, men and women who had burned away everything soft inside themselves. They carried no flags. They sang no songs. They carried only fire. Weeks turned into months as the fleets crossed the vast, dead stretches beyond the galactic rim. Strange, half-seen things moved out there, masses too large, energies too old to name. Humanity pushed on without hesitation because fear no longer held any power over them. And then, without warning, they found it. A world, not just any world, an ancient one, covered in titanic structures, black and gleaming like frozen oil. It was not natural. It had not been born. It had been built by something far older than any of the fallen empires humanity had destroyed. At the center of the world, a tower pierced the heavens, stretching up into low orbit. It pulsed faintly with an energy that felt almost alive. The anomaly's source. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Merrick studied the scans with growing certainty. "Prepare a landing team," she said. "I want boots on the ground within the hour." Vance nodded. "You're going yourself?" Merrick turned to him, a small flicker of something, pride or perhaps defiance, in her cold gaze. "If this is the last enemy we ever face, I intend to look it in the eye." The landing was rough. The atmosphere fought them, dense and heavy with strange particles that made the sky shimmer with unnatural colors. But humans had survived worse. They pushed through, landing heavy drop ships on cracked, blackened plains. Merrick led the advance, 100 soldiers fanning out behind her through the towering alien structures. Everything about the place felt wrong. The angles were too sharp. The dimensions seemed to twist if you stared too long. They reached the base of the tower, where a single door, massive and covered in runes older than any language, stood waiting. It opened as they approached, without a sound. Inside, the walls pulsed with a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Lights flickered, and something watched. Deep in the tower's heart, they found it. Not a weapon, not an army, a mirror, massive, stretching from floor to ceiling, framed in black stone. When Merrick stepped toward it, the surface rippled, and from within she saw herself, not as she was, but as humanity had become. Twisted, broken, a reflection of endless war, endless vengeance. Behind her reflection, shapes moved, shadows, clawing, grasping. They weren't alien, they weren't foreign, they were human. The mirror showed the truth. Humanity had not been at war with the galaxy. It had been at war with itself all along. The true enemy had always been their own hatred, their own need for retribution, their own fear. Marek stared into the mirror, into the nightmare she and her people had willingly become. For the first time in a long, long while, she felt a flicker of doubt, a whisper against the raging storm inside her. But it was far too late for regrets now. Behind her, the soldiers waited for orders, weapons ready, faces blank. Marek turned away from the mirror, her decision final. "Mark the planet," she said. "Then burn it." No one hesitated. No one questioned. As they prepared the charges that would turn the ancient world into ash, the mirror pulsed once more, sending one last signal into the void, a warning to whatever distant life might still be out there. Humanity is coming. Humanity has no mercy left. Humanity is the nightmare that will never end. As the Remembrance and its sister fleets vanished back into the endless dark, only ruins remained. The galaxy had survived its first great predator. But something worse now prowled the stars forever, and it wore the face of humanity. The Galactic Council had once laughed when the issue came up. Humans, a primitive race from the edge of the Orion Arm, were just starting to make noise in the cosmos. They had learned space travel a few decades earlier, stumbled into wormhole tech by accident, and had started sending explorers everywhere. Loud, reckless, stubborn, that was how the Council saw them. Not dangerous, not worth worrying about. So when the debate opened on Earth's future, almost every voice was the same. Enslave them. It was standard policy for species that advanced too quickly without proper authorization. Put them in controlled labor worlds, strip them of their technology, harvest their strengths. Humanity, they believed, would fit neatly into the system like all the others before them. The vote was almost unanimous. 87 council species, all noble, ancient, and proud, clicked their voting stones in favor of subjugation. Only 2 spoke against it, minor species who barely had a say. Their warnings were brushed aside. "The humans are unruly," they said. "Too violent, too unpredictable." Laughter echoed in the golden halls of the council. No one feared Earth. The fleets left a week later. Black ships darkened the skies over New York, Shanghai, Cairo, London. The people of Earth didn't surrender. They didn't even hesitate. A handful of hours after the first city was fired upon, humanity had responded. First came the missiles, old-fashioned and blunt. Then came the viral attacks, software bombs tearing through the invaders' systems like wildfire. Finally came something no one expected: humanity itself. They had learned more from the stars than anyone thought. Bioengineering, cybernetics, dark matter weaponry. Even before the Council had noticed them, Earth had been building, preparing, fighting among themselves, sure, but always growing sharper, meaner, smarter. War was humanity's oldest teacher, and they had paid attention. When the first alien dropships landed in Detroit, they were ripped apart in minutes. In Africa, entire platoons of Council soldiers disappeared into the jungles, never to be seen again. Tokyo's defense grid overloaded the attackers' shields with a hacking virus embedded inside a simple children's game. Moscow's winter swallowed armored beasts whole. No matter where they landed, the invaders bled. Weeks passed. Months. The council began to panic. What should have been an easy conquest turned into a nightmare. Every fleet they sent was shredded. Their best generals disappeared. Their war machines, so mighty in every other corner of the galaxy, failed against human ingenuity and rage. Then the unthinkable happened. Humanity launched their own fleet. It wasn't big. It wasn't pretty. Rusted cargo freighters welded into warships, battleships carved out of Earth's mining rigs, old satellites repurposed into kinetic kill weapons. But they moved fast, hit harder and worse. The humans didn't fight fair. They sabotaged council fleets from the inside. They hacked navigation systems mid-warp. They planted viruses in diplomatic envoys. No one was safe. Now the council species started seeing their own worlds burned, their own cities bombed from orbit, their own people enslaved. The council called an emergency meeting. 1,000 voices buzzing and hissing and growling across 1,000 worlds. They wanted answers. They wanted revenge. Above all, they wanted to understand how everything had gone so horribly wrong. But it was too late. As the council chambers buzzed in chaos, the great doors thundered open. A single human walked in. No armor, no army behind him, just a worn jacket, heavy boots, and a gaze that cut sharper than any weapon. He dropped something at the council's feet, a piece of wreckage, still smoldering from a downed flagship. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The human smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "You voted to enslave us," he said, voice low and clear. "Now you're the ones on your knees." Nobody dared to move at first. The councilors, proud rulers of 1,000 systems, just sat there frozen in their golden thrones. Some of them hissed under their breath, others reached for translators or weapons hidden in their robes. But none of them stood up. Not after seeing what had happened to their fleets, their worlds, their so-called unstoppable armies. The human stepped forward, his boots echoing on the polished marble floor. His name was Colonel Marcus Hale, though out here they would soon know him by a different title, the Voice of Earth. Not a politician, not a diplomat, a soldier. Because Earth wasn't here to beg or negotiate. Earth was here to deliver judgment. "You think you know power," Marcus said, his voice steady, almost casual. "You think you can sit in your gilded towers, pass your little votes, and play gods over others." He raised his hand slowly and pointed at the ceiling, where a hologram flickered to life. It showed Earth's fleet, ugly and ragtag, surrounding the Council's most sacred strongholds. Ships locked in orbit around homeworlds that hadn't seen war in 1,000 years. Weapons primed. "You thought you could enslave us," Marcus continued, pacing now, forcing the counselors to turn and follow him like scolded children. "You saw what you wanted to see. Primitive savages, easy to break. You never thought what would happen if we fought back. If we decided you were the threat." One of the counselors, a lizard-like creature with jeweled scales, finally found his courage. "This is a violation of—" Marcus shot him a look that froze the words in his throat. "Violation?" Marcus barked a laugh. "You voted to violate an entire planet, an entire people. You wanted slaves, and now you want to talk about rules?" He shook his head, disgusted. "Number, you don't get to hide behind your laws now. You made your choice." A few of the counselors whispered among themselves, trying to plan, to scheme, the way they always had. But Marcus could see it in their eyes, the fear. Real, naked fear. It was new to them. They weren't used to feeling weak. But humanity had a way of dragging even gods down into the dirt. "You're not leaving this room until you understand something," Marcus said. He pulled a small device from his jacket, a crude black cube no bigger than his fist. When he activated it, the walls around them changed. Not just the walls, the floor, the ceiling, everything. The counselors found themselves standing in a field of scorched earth. Around them rose the wreckage of their own ships, burning. Bodies lay scattered, council soldiers, broken and bloodied, their high-tech armor shattered. "This is what you created," Marcus said softly. "This is your legacy." He stepped closer to the lizard counselor, who had dared to speak. "You have two choices. Kneel and surrender every one of your empires to human governance, or keep fighting, and we'll wipe you out, all of you, species by species, planet by planet, until only ghosts are left to whisper about the day you tried to break Earth." Silence. Heavy, crushing silence. Finally, the eldest counselor, a towering being whose body shimmered like molten gold, rose from his throne. Slowly, stiffly, he bent one knee, then the other, and with that, the rest followed. Some out of fear, some out of desperation, a few, maybe, out of something close to respect. But they all knelt. Every last one of them. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stared down at them, the proud rulers of the galaxy, now bowing before the very species they once thought to enslave. "Remember this moment," Marcus said, "because it's the last mercy you'll ever get from us." Above them, the Earth fleet began to broadcast a message to every corner of the galaxy. "The age of the Council is over. The age of humanity has begun." The message spread faster than light itself. Every colony, every council world, every backwater trading post received the transmission. Some didn't believe it at first. They thought it was human propaganda, a clever trick. But the pictures that followed, the great council chambers desecrated, their proud leaders on their knees, those couldn't be faked. Across the galaxy, chaos erupted. Old alliances crumbled overnight. Trade networks collapsed. Slave markets burned. Species who had once bowed to council law found themselves free, but terrified. Without the council, who would protect them? Who would rule them? The answer came 3 days later, when the first Earth fleet arrived at the council's capital world, Virex Prime. Marcus Hale led them himself, standing at the helm of a battered human warship named Deliverance. It was barely spaceworthy by council standards, a rusted beast of welded steel, yet it carved a path through the void like a predator scenting blood. Marcus didn't bring peace. He brought a new order. The humans disarmed the planetary security forces first. Then they landed ground teams, soldiers, engineers, scientists, and began dismantling the Council's old systems. The golden statues of Council heroes were pulled down. The Hall of Species, a museum celebrating the Council's civilized rule, was converted into a prison. Every counselor who had voted for Earth's enslavement was marched through the streets in chains. The footage went viral. Billions cheered. Billions wept. Billions seethed. Not everyone loved their new human rulers. Some tried to resist. On Doral 6, an aristocratic rebellion rose up, funded by old council families. They thought the humans would hesitate, that they'd negotiate, that they'd respect the so-called nobility of the galaxy. They were wrong. Marcus deployed a single unit of Earth's shock marines, men and women who had cut their teeth in the worst wars Earth had ever known. They didn't ask questions. They didn't take prisoners. Within 72 hours, Doral 6 was nothing but smoking ruins. Every rebel leader was executed. Every city that resisted was flattened. Those who surrendered were spared. Barely. The message was clear. You either submit or you burn. Marcus stood atop the ruins of Doral's capital, looking out over the devastation with cold eyes. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel sorrow. He felt necessity. Earth had been given one chance to rise, and he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. "We can't afford weakness," he told his second-in-command, Captain Reza Malik. "Not now. Not ever." Malik nodded grimly. "They're scared of us. That's good. They'll think twice before crossing us." Marcus stared at the burning horizon. "Fear only lasts so long. We need something stronger." "What then?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He thought about the Council's centuries of rule, about the lies they told to keep themselves in power, about the wars they started just to thin out populations, about the billions they had enslaved, tortured, erased without a second thought. No, humanity wouldn't be that, but they wouldn't be soft either. "We build an empire," Marcus said finally. "A real one. One where no species can enslave another. One where everyone knows their place. One where humanity leads forever." And so it began. Earth's armies spread across the galaxy like wildfire. They didn't just conquer. They rebuilt. They rewrote laws. They established new governments loyal to humanity. Every planet, every station, every fleet had a human overseer. Resistance was crushed ruthlessly. Cooperation was rewarded with food, medicine, and technology that most species had never dreamed of having access to. It wasn't kindness, it was control. Soon, human children learned about new star systems the way they once learned about continents. Human flags flew on alien worlds. Human words became the language of trade, law, and diplomacy. The old council maps, once covered in colorful patches of alien empires, turned gray, the color of Earth's new dominion. But deep in the shadows of forgotten systems, old grudges festered. Seeds of rebellion took root, and Marcus knew it. He stood once again before the ruins of Virex Prime's great council hall, the banners of Earth snapping in the bitter wind. "We didn't ask for this war," he whispered to himself. "But we're damn sure going to finish it." Above him, the first human-built Dreadnoughts, colossal warships the size of cities, drifted into orbit. Earth was no longer a backwater planet. It was the beating heart of a new empire. And it was just getting started. The first signs of rebellion came quietly, whispers in dark alleys, symbols etched into walls, small things, easy to overlook in the grand sweep of conquest. But Marcus Hale didn't overlook them. He knew history too well. He knew that empires didn't fall to armies. They fell to ideas, to the seeds of defiance planted in the hearts of the desperate. On the mining colonies of the outer verge, a shipment of Earth's supplies vanished. No pirates, no storms, just gone. In the core worlds once loyal to the Council, human governors started to report riots. Small at first, quickly suppressed, but growing louder, angrier. There were rumors that some of the conquered Council species were meeting in secret, plotting, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Marcus sat in the war room aboard the flagship Deliverance. Maps and reports spread before him like a surgeon about to cut open a dying patient. Around the table, his generals and advisors waited for orders. "We knew this was coming," said Captain Reza Malik, frowning. "You can't conquer the galaxy without making enemies." Marcus nodded slowly. "It's not the battles that worry me," he said. "It's the belief. They're starting to believe they can beat us." The room fell silent. That was the real danger. Not weapons, not armies. Hope. Admiral Ortega, an older woman with silver hair and a cybernetic eye, leaned forward. "Let's crush it before it grows. We make examples, harsh ones, the old way." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. He remembered the Council's examples, entire cities vaporized for daring to speak out. Whole species erased from history because they dared to hope. Was that what humanity would become now? Just another tyrant with a prettier flag? We'll be smart about it, Marcus said finally. Targeted strikes. Leaders, not civilians. No mass slaughter unless we have no choice. Some of the generals looked disappointed. They wanted blood. They wanted to stamp out rebellion with fire and steel. But Marcus knew better. Every martyr they made would breed 10 more rebels. Humanity had to rule with an iron hand, yes, but it had to look clean. It had to look righteous. He pointed at the biggest cluster of trouble. The old council world of Jackstar, now under human occupation. Reports showed growing unrest, protests, sabotage, a few small attacks on human patrols. Start there, Marcus ordered. Find the leaders, cut them out. The strike teams moved fast. Within days, they uncovered a rebel cell. Students, merchants, even former council guards who had sworn loyalty to Earth, but now plotted behind their human overseers' backs. They had plans, detailed, terrifying plans, to hit human supply lines, ambush governors, even attempt to assassinate Marcus himself when he next visited the sector. Marcus watched the footage grimly. The captured rebels beaten, bloodied, but still defiant. One young Jackstari female, barely out of her teens, stared into the camera as if she could burn a hole through the screen. "You think you've won," she spat, her voice raw. "But every world you take makes us stronger. Every death you cause feeds the fire." Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. This was what the council had never understood. You could crush bones, but ideas slipped through the cracks like smoke. "We can't just kill her," Malik said, reading the mood. "She's too public already. She'll be a symbol if we execute her." Marcus nodded. "Then we don't kill her." He ordered a new kind of attack. Psychological warfare. They broadcast a message galaxy-wide. A fake confession, carefully edited, showing the young rebel begging for forgiveness, praising humanity's rule, blaming her fellow rebels for violence and suffering. They doctored it so skillfully that even seasoned analysts couldn't spot the cuts. It worked, at first. Some of the unrest cooled. Jackstar went quiet. Other sectors hesitated, unsure what was real anymore. But in the shadows, deeper and darker rebellions began to form. Rebels who knew not to trust the screens. Rebels who learned from their enemies. Rebels who didn't just want to end human rule. They wanted to erase humanity from the stars. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Deliverance as another world flickered into submission below him. He should have felt victorious. He should have felt proud. Instead, he felt something gnawing at the edges of his mind, something cold and inevitable. This wasn't peace. This was just the beginning of a new war. And this time, he wasn't sure Earth would survive it. It started with a whisper. A human governor on the frontier world of Tyran 5 was found dead in his mansion, his body cold and broken, eyes wide in shock. Official reports called it a heart failure. But Marcus knew better. Governors didn't die of heart attacks on fortified worlds, not when they had triple-layered security and round-the-clock surveillance. The real cause surfaced 2 days later. An assassination. Precision work. Clean. Professional. Not the reckless kind of violence that desperate rebels usually managed. No, this was organized, funded, planned. And the worst part? The killers weren't alien. They were human. The report shook Marcus to his core. He sat alone in his quarters aboard the Deliverance, staring at the encrypted file flashing on the tablet before him. Photos of the dead governor, photos of the operatives, all human. Former Earth military, thought to be loyal, now turned traitor. They had called themselves Sons of Terra. Marcus laughed bitterly. Sons of Terra. They weren't fighting for Earth's glory. They were fighting against him. Against the empire he had built with blood and fire. "They think I've betrayed humanity," he muttered to himself. "They think I'm the tyrant." He couldn't deny the thought stung. When he had started this conquest, it wasn't supposed to be about power. It was about survival. about making sure humanity would never be slaves to anyone, ever again. But somewhere along the line, conquest had become the way of life. Every world captured, every rebellion crushed, every alien race brought to heel. It had changed them. It had changed him. The door chimed. Reza Malik entered without waiting for permission. His uniform was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. "We've captured one," Malik said, throwing a tablet onto Marcus's desk. "One of the sons." Marcus picked it up. A young man stared back at him, early 20s, sharp features, defiant expression. His name was Ethan Voss, a decorated soldier who had fought at the siege of Orion's Belt and had been one of Marcus's personal recommendations for the first wave of colonial administrators, betrayed from within. "They're not alone," Malik said grimly. "We think the sons have spread across half the sectors. Soldiers, engineers, even some governors. They're planning something big, real big." Marcus leaned back, the leather of his chair creaking. "How long?" "Days. Maybe a week before they act. Less if they realize we're onto them." Marcus drummed his fingers on the desk. He couldn't fight a two-front war, rebels in the outer systems, traitors inside his own ranks. The Empire was already stretched thin, too much territory and too few loyal men to hold it. If he moved wrong now, everything they had built would collapse. He stood up abruptly. "Get me the High Command," he barked. "Emergency session, now." Within the hour, every admiral, general, and major governor appeared on the holochannels, their faces grim and flickering in blue light. Marcus didn't waste time. "There's treason inside our empire," he said. "Humans, our own people. They call themselves Sons of Terra. They want to overthrow this government, dismantle everything we've fought for." Murmurs of shock and anger rippled through the council. "They call me a tyrant," Marcus said, his voice cold. "They think we should have stayed small, stayed weak. They think we should have begged the council for mercy instead of crushing them. I won't allow it." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I am declaring martial law across all human and alien sectors, effective immediately. Anyone suspected of collaborating with the Sons will be detained. Anyone caught aiding them will be executed." Even through the holochannels, Marcus could feel the unease. Some of his generals shifted in their seats. A few even dared to glance at each other, doubt flickering in their eyes. He crushed it before it could grow. "If you are not with me," he said, his voice rising like a hammer, "you are against Earth, and Earth does not forgive traitors." He ended the call without waiting for questions. Malik approached him cautiously afterward. "Sir, martial law across the entire empire? That's a lot of ground to cover, a lot of people to watch." Marcus stared out the viewport, the stars cold and distant. "Then we better get started. Because if humanity was going to survive the storm that was coming, it wouldn't be through hope. It would be through absolute, unrelenting control." And Marcus Hale was ready to pay the price, no matter how much blood it cost. The rebellion didn't start with explosions. It started with silence. Across dozens of human-controlled worlds, communication lines went dead. Patrols failed to check in. Supply ships vanished without a trace. It was as if someone had pulled the nerves out of the Empire's body, leaving it twitching, blind and deaf. Marcus Hale stood in the command center of deliverance, staring at the blank screens, feeling the walls of his empire cracking under his feet. "They're cutting us off," Malik said, grim-faced beside him. "World by world, they're isolating the core." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. He wasn't surprised anymore. The Sons of Terra had learned well. They weren't trying to beat him in open battle. They were bleeding him from within, letting the Empire rot until it crumbled under its own weight. "Order all fleet commanders to regroup at Earth," Marcus snapped. "Pull everyone back. We hold the core worlds at any cost." Malik hesitated. Sir, that leaves the outer colonies undefended. They're already lost, Marcus said bitterly. We save what we can. The order went out, but it was already too late in some places. On Jackstar, human garrisons were overwhelmed. Footage streamed in of captured soldiers paraded through the streets, jeered by alien crowds and human rebels alike. On Tyrin 5, the human governor's palace burned, a crude banner waving from the ruins, a black fist clenched over a shattered earth. Even worse was the betrayal from within the fleet itself. Marcus trusted his admirals. He handpicked them, trained them, fought beside them. But trust meant nothing now. Reports flooded in of ships mutinying, turning their guns on loyalist forces, hijacking supplies meant for Earth's defenses. Malik slammed a fist onto the console. How did it get this bad? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He knew exactly how it had gotten this bad. It wasn't just the aliens or the sons of Terra. It was the dream he had built, a dream of human dominance, of an empire born from vengeance and fear. They had conquered the stars, but they had lost themselves along the way. Fear bred hate, hate bred rebellion, and now rebellion was feeding on everything they had created. A chime sounded, a secure line opening. Only one person had access to that channel. Marcus tapped the console. Admiral Ortega's face appeared, blood running from a cut above her eyebrow, smoke billowing behind her. Sir, she started, coughing. The fleet at Rigel's Reach. It's gone. Betrayed from inside. They're coming for Earth. They're moving fast. Marcus leaned in. How many? Ortega's face twisted. Too many. The line cut out with a sharp buzz. Marcus stared at the black screen, his reflection flickering back at him. In that moment, he didn't see a savior of humanity. He didn't see a conqueror. He saw a man standing at the edge of a grave he had dug with his own hands. We have to prepare for siege, Malik said quietly. Fortify Earth's orbit. Evacuate non-combatants. Marcus shook his head. No evacuation. No retreat. But sir, Marcus turned to him, eyes blazing. If Earth falls, it's over. The Empire dies with it. Malik swallowed, then saluted. Understood. Across Earth, alarms blared. The cities, glittering monuments of human pride, turned into fortresses overnight. Orbital cannons primed. Shield arrays crackled to life. Every man, woman, and child old enough to hold a weapon was drafted into the militia. Marcus addressed them all in a broadcast that lit up every screen on the planet. This is the final hour, he said. The traitors come for us, fueled by lies and weakness. They want to tear down everything we have built, everything we have fought for. They want Earth on its knees again. He leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. We will show them the price of betrayal. We will show them the strength of humanity. He ended the broadcast, the screen fading to black. For a moment, there was a heavy silence across Earth. Then a roar, from the cities to the mountains, from the seas to the skies. A roar of defiance, of fury. Earth would not go quietly. Marcus stood on the balcony of the central command tower, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the rebel fleet was coming. His enemies, once friends. His people, now divided. The first shots of the final war were about to be fired, and Marcus Hale was ready to meet them with fire and blood. The night sky above Earth lit up long before the rebel ships broke through orbit. From the ground, it looked almost beautiful. Streaks of burning light, flashes of color as debris rained down. But there was nothing beautiful about what was coming. The sons of Terra had gathered every ship, every gun, every piece of stolen technology they could find. Their fleet was a black tide, blotting out the stars. Marcus Hale stood at the heart of Earth's defense network, in the command tower known as Fortress 1. The walls shook as the first orbital strikes hammered the planetary shields. Officers barked orders, screens flashed red warnings, and somewhere far below, sirens howled like the planet itself was screaming. "Shield integrity at 72%, Malik reported, his voice tight. Marcus didn't flinch. "Hold them!" The rebel fleet came in waves. First, the heavy cruisers, pounding the shields with brute force. Then the boarding craft, sleek and fast, slipping past defenses to land troops in the cities. Earth's defenses fought back with everything they had. Railguns the size of skyscrapers, plasma batteries tearing through space, swarms of fighter drones buzzing like angry bees. But it wasn't enough. No matter how many rebel ships they destroyed, more kept coming, like locusts, endless and hungry. Marcus knew this wasn't just about strategy anymore. This was hatred, pure and simple. The Suns didn't just want to defeat Earth. They wanted to wipe it clean. A comms officer turned to Marcus, pale-faced. "They've broken through at Sector 9. Heavy infantry landing in New Chicago." Marcus gritted his teeth. "Send the 8th Legion. Push them back." Another report came in. Enemy troops breaching in Europe, riots in the underground bunkers, civilian panic in Asia. It was everywhere. The empire Marcus had built was bleeding from 1,000 wounds. He grabbed a rifle from a nearby weapons rack, checking the magazine with practiced hands. "Malik," he said, tossing the second-in-command a sidearm, "we're not sitting here while they tear our world apart." Malik grinned despite the chaos. About time. They moved fast. Dropships took them to the front lines. The ruins of New Chicago, now a battleground of twisted steel and shattered glass. Rebel soldiers moved through the streets in tight squads, their weapons brutal, their armor scavenged from 100 fallen worlds. And leading them were humans, faces Marcus recognized from recruitment files, men and women who had once sworn loyalty to Earth. There was no time for speeches. Marcus waded into the fight without hesitation, rifle barking, every shot a burst of rage. Around him, Earth's defenders fought with savage desperation. Militia units, battered soldiers, even civilians, all throwing themselves at the enemy with a ferocity that made Marcus's chest ache with pride and sorrow at the same time. The battle was chaos. Explosions ripped through buildings. Shrapnel rained from the sky. Marcus fought like a man possessed, leading charge after charge, pushing the rebels back block by block. But he knew it was only a temporary victory. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and Earth's defenses were cracking. Hours blurred together. The sun never rose. The sky stayed black and burning. By the time Marcus stumbled back to Fortress 1, bloodied and exhausted, the news was worse. Malik met him at the gates, his uniform torn, his face grim. "They've breached the southern perimeter," he said. "They're inside the city." Marcus wiped blood from his forehead. "How long do we have?" Malik hesitated. "Hours. Maybe less." Marcus nodded slowly. He had expected this. He had fought to delay it. But in the end, Earth was losing. He climbed the steps to the command balcony one last time, staring out over the ruined city. Fires burned in every direction. The air was thick with smoke and death. In the distance, he could see the rebel banners rising, black fists on shattered globes. He raised the old rifle in his hand and slammed it down on the balcony rail. "We are not done," he growled. His voice, hoarse but defiant, carried across the plaza where the last defenders gathered. "You hear me?" he shouted. "We fight to the last breath, to the last man. We are Earth, and we will never kneel again." A roar answered him, broken, battered but fierce. Marcus knew he would die here. That much was certain. But he would not die silent. He would not die easy. If Earth was going to fall, it would fall in fire, with every last soul screaming defiance into the void. The final battle had begun, and Marcus Hale, the man who had once conquered the stars, would meet it with bloodied fists and a heart full of rage. The last stand wasn't glorious, it wasn't clean, and it wasn't noble. It was a raw, desperate brawl for every block, every street, every crumbling tower that still stood above the burning remains of New Chicago. The defenders of Earth, soldiers, civilians, even wounded children clutching scavenged rifles, fought because they had no other choice. Marcus Hale was in the thick of it. His uniform was torn, the once proud insignia of Earth's empire scorched away by plasma fire. His rifle had long since run dry, and now he fought with a scavenged blade torn from a fallen enemy, each swing fueled by fury and heartbreak. The sons of Terra poured through the breaches like a living wave, their black banners snapping in the smoke-choked wind. They shouted slogans about freedom, about redemption, about saving humanity from itself. Marcus heard none of it. All he heard was the roar of battle and the pounding of his own blood in his ears. Malik fought beside him, bleeding from a dozen wounds but still standing. They didn't speak anymore. Words were useless now. Their bond was the kind forged only in the fire of hopeless wars. A glance, a nod, a shared grimace that meant, "We fight until we fall." Hours dragged on. The line collapsed and reformed a dozen times. Every alley, every ruined square became a killing ground. Human blood mixed with alien blood, with rebel blood, soaking the ground until it turned to black mud. And still, Marcus fought. At some point, he didn't know when, he found himself back at the steps of Fortress 1, the command tower now half destroyed, smoke pouring from its shattered spires. A small knot of defenders, barely 100 souls left, had gathered there for their last defense. Some had homemade bombs strapped to their chests. Others clutched rusted knives or simple steel pipes. They were the last hope of Earth's empire. The rebel forces closed in, surrounding them on all sides. Marcus climbed the broken stairs, dragging his battered body upward until he stood atop the last bastion of the human empire. His voice was ragged, almost gone, but somehow he found enough strength to shout one last order. "Hold." And they did. When the rebels charged, they met walls of bullets and blades. They met teeth and fists and blind, furious resistance. Every step they gained cost them dearly. Marcus was a whirlwind at the heart of it, cutting, striking, dodging, refusing to fall. But he knew it was ending. One by one, the defenders fell. Malik went down, shot through the chest as he shielded a teenage boy with a broken rifle. The boy screamed and kept firing. Others fell silently, without drama, swallowed by the endless tide. Marcus fought until his arms wouldn't lift anymore, until his legs buckled, until the blade in his hand snapped in two and he was left swinging fists at enemies twice his size. A rebel soldier tackled him to the ground. Another booted him in the ribs. He felt bones crack, tasted blood in his mouth. They dragged him up, shoving him to his knees atop the ruined balcony. Around him, Fortress 1 burned. The black banners of the Sons of Terra were already being raised atop the rubble. The rebel commander, a woman Marcus recognized from the files, once a loyal Earth general named Cassian Wren, stepped forward. Her armor was black, her eyes hard. "It's over, Hale," she said. Her voice wasn't cruel, it was tired. "Surrender. Save what's left of your people." Marcus lifted his head, blood dripping from his lips. His body screamed for him to give up, to close his eyes and let the darkness take him. But he didn't. He grinned. It wasn't a smile of victory. It wasn't even a smile of defiance. It was the smile of a man who knew something the rest had forgotten. "You think killing me saves you?" Marcus rasped. You think tearing down Earth's empire makes you free." He coughed, spitting blood at Ren's boots. "But you're wrong. You'll tear each other apart. You'll beg for the order we gave you. And when the stars burn, when your new world falls into chaos, you'll remember us." Cassian's jaw tightened. She raised her weapon. Marcus Hale laughed, a hoarse, broken sound. And when the shot rang out, when the world tilted and darkness rushed up to claim him, he died the way he lived, on his feet, unbroken, with fire still in his heart. The Empire of Earth was dead, but its ghost would haunt the galaxy for centuries to come.